You know, when I was young, I used to get lost in the woods behind my house. It's one of the scariest feelings I ever had as a child growing up. And when I was lost, I would start to get extremely anxious. I would start to panic. Sometimes I cried. You know, I couldn't think straight. Sometimes I'd just start yelling for someone to help me. There were times that I thought I was stuck out in the wilderness forever. You know, before Jesus went up the mountain to preach his message that we've come to know as the Sermon on the Mount, he'd been out in the wilderness, fasting and praying, wrestling with temptation. Some believe that there was some literal devil, you know, a little red guy with horns, you know, out there running around tempting Jesus like on a Looney Tunes cartoon. But what that story really helps us to see is that these temptations were deeply internal to who Jesus was. They were deeply human temptations, which is how we can relate to him. They were deeply personal temptations. Jesus being out in the wilderness is a metaphor for what was really going on in this story. I mean, of course, there's allusions to the Israelites wandering in the desert after the Exodus from Egypt for 40 years. He was in the wilderness for 40 days. But this was also a metaphor for the internal struggle that we all wrestle with. Those internal reactivities that cause us to go into that fight or flight mentality, that place within us where we kind of get knocked off our center. When we lose our grounding, get lost in the wilderness of our own lives. What Jesus teaches us, what he shows us is as he uses contemplative practices like taking time to be away from others, to fast and to pray, to dig into God's Word. What he teaches us is how to ground ourselves when we feel like we're getting lost in the wilderness of our own minds, when we feel like we're losing our way. You see, Jesus knew what he was about to face in the persecution of others who did not understand his way. He knew they were about to try to persecute him because the rulers of the world were concerned and they were afraid that they were going to lose their power in this kingdom that Jesus proclaimed, because it was a power they didn't know. It was like he knew he was heading into battle. And before he could go, he needed to take some time away in the wilderness to deal with the war that was inside of him before he could face the war outside. I mean, we all have those temptations in us that threaten to knock us off our center, whether rooted in our past, perhaps fear of what we don't know, or aching wounds from long ago. We all have those parts of ourselves in the wilderness places of our minds that try to knock us off our center. And it's that very fact of getting knocked off our center that makes us so angry sometimes. It makes us so upset when we have to deal with people that do not think and believe, or people who do not behave the way we wish that they would. And getting knocked off our center causes a fight or a flight syndrome within us. It happens in our families all the time. Now imagine what happens when that reality is going on within the wilderness of our own minds, and then we face a real situation. Then we face true persecution from those who do not understand, or those who simply do not like the message, the radical message of love and welcome that Jesus calls us to. We've not had to deal with the same kinds of persecution that Jesus and his disciples had to face in their time. But there are times that our faith comes under attack. There are times that the things we face in life threaten to upend the faith that we have claimed. Jesus knew this would happen to us. And he calls us in these moments to be peacemakers. Which is what I think Jesus knew, which we see in all the other Beatitudes, which are very personal, and they deal with the nature of our own heart and our mind. What Jesus knew is that being peacemakers in the midst of dangerous times starts with creating peace within ourselves. That's what he was doing out in the wilderness. He was conquering the war within him before he was ready to go out to conquer the war between him and the powers and principalities of the world outside of him. You see, when you get knocked off your center, how do you get grounded again? Do you have a problem with anger? Do you just run away from your problems because you're afraid to confront them? Do you avoid conflict because you don't like it when others don't agree with you? Look, these are the kinds of things in our lives that cause us to lose our grounding. They can defeat us if we aren't careful. These are the kind of things that cause us to break relationship with others. Our family, our friends, co-workers, people at church. These are the kinds of things that can make us feel so alone. We have to be able to master the war within ourselves so that we can deal with the difficult realities of life. Being peacemakers isn't about avoiding conflict. The Roman government used force to scare people into submission so they could avoid conflict. But my friends, that is not peace. Being peacemakers is about creating peace within ourselves so that we can confront the most difficult situations, even the very persecution that Jesus suffered as they nailed him to a cross. We can confront them from a grounded and centered place, because when we become those kinds of people, we become like Christ. We become children of God. You know, this forced stay-at-home order is an invitation to us. It's an invitation to us in the midst of this Lenten season. It is an invitation that is testing our patience, it's testing our resolve, it's testing our ability to stay rooted and grounded in the kind of compassionate people that God created us to be. And if you don't believe me, then try being the parent of a couple of toddlers when you're forced to stay in the house with them every single hour of every single day. Look, this is like a forced Sabbath, and I can hear God saying to us, I can hear God saying, you needed this. The world needed this. I mean, now don't get me wrong. I don't think God created this virus to hurt people so we could learn a lesson. That's not how God works. But I do believe that God can use all things for good. This is an opportunity for us to reconnect to what really matters. This is an opportunity to get grounded in God. This is an opportunity to remember who it is that God has called us to be. The busyness of life can leave us run down and exhausted and feeling lost in the wilderness. Even when the life God desires is right in front of us. Are you using this as an opportunity for Sabbath? Are you using this as a time to create peace within the wilderness places of your heart and your mind? Look, we can either stay lost in the woods, or we can center ourselves in the way of Christ and live like Jesus. So may you, in your own life, take the time to pause and create peace within yourself, to create peace within the wilderness places of your own heart and mind. May you make this a regular practice to take time for Sabbath, to step away from the busyness of the world so that you can create peace in your own soul. May you become so rooted in the blessings of God that you can face the world in moments of trial and temptation, moments of crisis, even in moments of persecution for what you think and believe. May you become so rooted in the blessings of God that you create peace within your own heart and mind. Because that, my friends, that is what leads to peace in the world, when we create that kind of peace within ourselves. And when you find that peace, which is the peace of Christ, when you live like Jesus, you will see signs of abundant life all around you.